I'd like to talk today about one of Jesus' most intriguing parables, and it is that of the wheat and the tares, or the wheat and the weeds. And it's this situation where there is a field, and in the field there is wheat, but also there are weeds growing up because someone has planted weeds or they've seeded themselves into it. And so the servants on the farm go to the farmer and say, shall we uproot the weeds now? Because get rid of them. And then we'll have a lovely, perfect harvest at the end. And Jesus, or the farmer, who I guess is the kind of God-like figure here, says, no, don't do that. Let them grow together, and then we'll sort it out at harvest time. And at harvest time, we'll sort out which is the wheat. And we'll gather them up, and we'll sort out which are the weeds, and we'll throw them away. And it's counterintuitive, because most of us who've done any gardening know that if you want a lovely lawn, once you start seeing some weeds appear, you need to uproot them quickly, because those weeds will start colonizing the lawn and they'll keep seeding themselves. And the lawn, which at one point looked lovely and green and full of perfect grass, now is full of weeds. So the kind of logic is to get rid of it as soon as you can. But Jesus is saying here, no, don't do that. You've got to do it at the end. Now, partly this is drawing on a real farming phenomenon. I picked up my visual aid here, and is this wheat or is this a weed? And this would be part of the problem. Now, I can tell you it's a weed because it's from my garden, and I haven't planted any wheat. But darnel is one of the problems with that and this appeared amongst wheat in the ancient world as well as the modern world, is that for a long time in its growth, it looks the same. The weed looks the same as the wheat. You can't tell the difference. It's only at the end of the season that the wheat starts growing its flower, which is good to eat, and the weed kind of shows itself for what it is, and you need to get rid of it. So in a sense, Jesus is drawing his wisdom from a real natural phenomenon, which is, even if your logic is to get rid of the weed as soon as you can and uproot it, you can't do it. You're not sufficiently perceptive. No one can be sufficiently perceptive because it's very hard to tell at an early stage which will prove to be the wheat which is fruitful and which will prove to be the weed which is negative. And so if you get that in your head, it's less counterintuitive because you can see where Jesus is coming from. But it also presents an interesting question about the world, because Jesus said, the world is like this. What does the world look like if we don't uproot weeds? We just let them grow alongside the wheat. And I think we see this in today's culture. Curiously, there is now a trend towards uprooting perceived weeds as soon as you can, before they've even had a chance to speak, if you like. So an example of this was when Amber Rudd, who's a Conservative politician, had her invitation to speak at the Oxford University Feminist Society withdrawn at the last minute because she'd also been involved in the Windrush scandal when she was Home Secretary. And there was a truth in that. But you look at it and think, well, really, so what? There was no wisdom she had to share with the Oxford University Feminist Society. This is such an egregious sin, is it, that you can't even allow her to speak? You wonder. And the curious thing about this trend is this is a trend which is not from within the church. It's from the world, sort of from the left wing, I suppose. But it mirrors when the church did this really badly. And I think our own history is littered really with embarrassments. So the Mothers' Union, for example, now is quite a liberal organisation. But in the 50s and 60s, you were not allowed to join the Mothers' Union if you were divorced. And so it was trying to preserve, I think, the state of marriage. So it had a kind of good motivation, but look back and think about all the insights those divorced women would have had. What was making a divorce in the 50s? It must have been pretty, they probably had some pretty important tales to tell. But no. We mustn't listen to them. We mustn't infect the Mothers' Union. I hasten to add, this is not what the Mothers' Union is like now. But because I think we've learned, the Mothers' Union has learned that a more generous approach. But just as we've gone more generous in the church, it feels like the world is getting less generous in listening to people who they know have got some things they disagree with. And this parable, I think, has really got some insights to share with us now, in that can we actually recognize that even on the surface, this looks like there's going to be weed. Yeah, but let's have the humility to think perhaps it may not be. And then also, and this is where the parable, as parables always do break down, you recognize a sort of false dichotomy. I'm not like wheat or weeds. I have like good bits and bad parts of myself. So have you, and so has everyone. And so, given that we're all a mix, let's stop separating some people as beyond the pale, because that's not true to life. Very few people are unadulterated good or bad. And also we're missing out on wisdom. We're missing out on the wisdom that's around the place. And it'd be a real shame if the kind of nasty judgmentalism that the church once had and has largely lost starts becoming a norm in society once again. It's kind of crazy.